Ein sonniges Hallo aus San Diego, ich bin's, eure Vanessa. Wir sind für euch einmal um die halbe Welt gereist, denn hier in San Diego findet die nächsten 4 Tage die größte Comicmesse der Welt statt, die Comic-Con 2011.
Well, this is an interesting time for rebooting and reimagining franchises, and this was one that had one 10 years ago this year. So in what climate did you develop a take on this that's different enough but also pleasing to the Apes fans from the first series of 5?
Well, I think everything you just said sort of proved in a way that it was quite a challenge in many ways, a really fascinating challenge. And I think in short, the answer to that is it's a really timeless story, like all great mythologies. So the very idea of doing this film that harked back to an original mythology, but at the same time did something different with it, and is really an origin story in the truest sense of the word. You know, it worked in our day and age, and frankly, it just was never going to be possible to do this film until the technology caught up with it, and that's because we're dealing with real apes, where our story is an origin story about how the great apes of today in our world that become more sentient, that become more intelligent through this repercussion of a scientific experiment, how they form this band to then sort of rise up and there's this revolution within our midst. And so to do that and to not use live apes and to actually do it using human actors playing real apes, the only way we could have done it was with performance capture. We couldn't do it with prosthetic suits like the other films in the series had. So I think first and foremost, that was how we did it. Why we did it, I would say that, you know, it goes back to all the great mythologies, the Hercules story, the, you know, other cinematic stories of revolution like Spartacus. It's a great story about how a species within our world, on our planet, could actually rise up and become the alpha of this earth. No, I mean, the writers, I think, you know, I came onto the project when the script was pretty much fully formed, and the writers had made, with the studio, a very conscious decision to create an origin story that actually recreates the mythology, restarts the mythology, and whilst remaining true to certain aspects of the mythology and working towards the 1968 original in terms of its narrative. And we have certain elements in our story like the Icarus and things like that are taking place within the background. But no, I mean, to be brutally honest with you, the reason for the time travel in the original series was because they never intended to make the sequels, and that's the way they figured out how to make the sequels. So I don't think it would have been doing it, both the franchise or ourselves any service at all to actually then trying to be slave to that. We wanted to do something fresh and new and a really truthful origin story.
Andy, can I ask, this is obviously, watching the trailers and seeing the footage of Caesar, it's obviously a very different kind of look for a Planet of the Apes film. I was wondering if you talk about the physicality of actually getting into, I guess, the mind of not just an ape, but a sort of a hyper-intelligent ape.
Yeah, I mean, my job was, you know, there were obviously there's lots of other actors on this movie who are playing apes, and everyone at base level had to learn how to behave like their respective, you know, ape, whether it be orangutan, gorilla or chimpanzee. You know, but really for me that was the starting point, and I think it's sort of important for people to understand that when you take on a role which is going to use performance capture technology, you know, you're learning. You know, if you're becoming another creature, then you do have to literally learn the choreography before you can start getting onto the more important business of character. And for me, it's ground level basically. So all of that stuff is base level. Then you start to examine the character. And the reason I took this role was because of the extraordinary nature and the writing of this role, because it's I think one of the most emotionally engaging, sort of sentient characters that there's been, you know, or creatures that has ever been written for on screen. And so we, you know, Rupert and I talked long and hard about how we wanted to approach the character of Caesar, who in effect is, you know, a product of. He's a chimpanzee. Yes, he's inherited this drug, which is given him this super intelligence. So how do we do that? How do we kind of rather arrogantly say, well, just because he's got more intelligence, he should be more human-like, or you know, I mean, his journey kind of covers this incredible path of being a very innocent young child, and we talked a lot about gifted children and kind of plugging into children, you know, children who could play concertos at the age of 4 or be brilliant at maths, and you know, but are unaware of that kind of intelligence. It's just natural to them. You know, Caesar's brought up with human beings and believes himself to be of that species. Will, who's played by James Franco, his father, is his father figure, and they have an incredibly close relationship. And then at a certain point, he reaches a moment of self-awareness where he sees, you know, he's led a very sheltered existence. He then confronts himself and realizes he's very much a freak, like a freak of nature, a Frankenstein, a John Merrick, if you like, Elephant Man kind of character. And at that point, it coincides with being taken away from his family that he's grown up with, that he loves and is loved by, and is thrown into a prison, a hardcore prison, a sanctuary with other apes, a species, his own species, who he does not recognize. So, and then eventually he manages to bring this disparate group of apes together and you know, and find a common language between them and lead them to revolution. It was a challenge of trying to obviously get inside the mind of a creature, but also from a technical point of view, because of the look of the character, you know, Caesar looks like a chimpanzee. So for me, it was, we had to discover when he becomes more physically human-like, or when he becomes bipedal, when there are very, very important character moments, and pinpointing exactly and pitching the character all the way through. So that you felt, I was able as an actor, I suppose, knowing that Caesar looked like a chimp, to experiment with being pretty much a human being within an ape's skin, and treading a very, treading that fine line of communicating everything physically and through vocalizations, but everything, we constantly, didn't we? We constantly sort of looked at, we didn't want to kind of Disneyfy the character without kind of putting that being down on Disney, but without being not making him too saccharine or too sweet, but actually to convey the emotions of the character very truthfully, and to give him an emotional intelligence.
Yeah, I mean the most important thing for us to do is, Caesar doesn't speak, apes don't talk, so how do we tell their story of how he's feeling and how he's thinking? And we had the opportunity to use sign language because of the idea that his surrogate father teaches him how to sign and therefore communicate that way. But that's quite controversial in itself, because there is a belief that apes can't sign language; they can only mimic signing. But so we had to sort of show the narrative, the visual exposition of his thought process, of what he's doing and what his decisions were, through his facial expression, through his physical movement, his posture, all of that. So, but at the same time, remain true to what a real simian. How he acts, how he moves, and that was quite an interesting challenge.
From the trailer, it looks like a lot of the problems, like Apes uprising, and a lot of the amazing scientific breakthroughs, like apes gaining intelligence, are derived from testing for a cure for Alzheimer's with animals. I'm curious, is this film anti-science at all?
No, I don't think it is. I mean, personally, not, absolutely not. I hate films that are all about morality tales where careful what you wish for and don't dabble with things you don't understand. It's not about that. There are certain characters within the film that are proponents of that sort of line of thinking and more moralistic, perhaps, and or at least more kind of humanistic, I guess. But no, for me, it's much more about mankind's hubris. It's like here you've got James Franco's character looking to actually achieve something that is very personal to him because of the fact that the disease is affecting him personally and his father and all of that. But at the same time, it's about his hubris. It's about his sense of ambition. It's about actually being able to find a cure for something that is so devastating. But at the same time, there is a repercussion to that. And I mean, without getting too far-flung about it, you could sort of say that any aspect of our own evolution bizarrely always seems to be born out of conflict. If you look at aviation in World War I, you know, we advanced massively in terms of our understanding of aviation technology because of that war. And we have the jet airplane because of it. So it's always that kind of gray area of, you know, and that's what makes us human. That's what makes our species so complex. And I think future films, potentially, if there are future films for this starting point, will be about how apes deal with those questions as well.
This question's for Andy. As you said, you worked with a lot of actors that were playing these simian characters, and so when you come to your own performance on how to play Caesar, in a way, do you work with the others to try to help them get to a place where there's a synergy in terms of how you're playing these? I mean, obviously Caesar is more developed than the others are, but how do you work with a group when you're doing the mocap and trying to find a unity in performance as well?
We were very lucky because we worked with the wonderful Terry Notary, who was actually the movement coach on this, and he worked extensively with all of the other actors and brought them to their own subspecies. So he was very specific and studied very hard, gorillas and orangutans and chimps, and this movie would be nowhere without his input. It was phenomenal. I mean, I was slightly outside of that group, and purposefully so, in that I was finding my own language, my own physical language. But yeah, Terry, who also plays a role in the film, he plays Rocket, one of the characters. He worked tirelessly with everybody, and I mean, it's a really the second act of the movie is an incredible act, because you have not only a lot of it is not communicated, as we're saying, through dialogue, but the dislocation of all of these different species, and all of this sanctuary is really a product of ex-lab chimps, entertainment industry orangutans, sort of like it's a whole mishmash of really screwed up simians, kind of all hanging out together and just not really knowing how to get it and how to connect with each other, except through violence, as in a prison situation. And so and Terry really created that hierarchy and helped create all of that.
To continue the conversation of motion capture technology, how do you think that the Academy should begin recognizing this as its own category in performance acting? Do you think that the number of performances that are coming out with this technology, and they're powerful, they're becoming more and more, performances and not just capturing? How do you feel about the future of motion capture? Do you think the Academy should recognize it?
Do you want to say something?
Yeah, sure. No, I think if performance capture becomes part of, on a mass level, a part of filmmaking and the way we understand filmmaking, in the same way that every aspect, if you look at the history of film, when film started, it was all stage-bound, it was all shot on sets. Then for the first time, everyone went on location, and then suddenly, we're actually shooting in a real street, or film like Naked City or whatever it is in the 50s, that was the first time a documentary-style approach. Everything always evolves, and I think right now people are scared of performance capture because they don't fully understand it. And the great thing about performance capture is it's actually, it completely unties an actor, it unties a filmmaker as well, in terms of giving you so much opportunity to create something. You become a little bit like you become the puppet as well as the puppeteer, and so as soon as people understand that what you see on screen is really representative of what we are shooting on set, then I think absolutely it will. But I think people still have that skepticism that, it's this bizarre collaboration where things deviate from what we actually shot. And I honestly don't think that's the case, because I think if that were the case, then you wouldn't be able to have a really, really complete performance, which you certainly see in Andy's performance playing Caesar. It's his expression. You understand it's him, and he's playing a chimpanzee, and I kind of, in a way, I challenge you to sort of identify a chimpanzee out of a crowd of another 150. It's quite hard, and I think by the very nature of Andy's performance, you can do that with Caesar. You can really identify that's him, and that's, in a way, that's sort of indication, I think, that this is all about individual performance, and it's not about the technology. And Weta were the first to let me understand that, and really push for me to understand that, push the technology to one side and just focus on the story and the way you would normally work with an actor on a traditional set, and that's what we did. Thanks very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Can you make any nod to the Statue of Liberty in this one?
Oh, blimey. Yes, we do. Do you have a
Oh, sure. I was waiting for the couple of other